This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for your company. We have a massive show lined up today, but first let's get straight into media meltdowns. Well, this week, French President Emmanuel Macron was assaulted by his 72-year-old wife, First Lady Brigitte Macron, for the world to see. And although the slap was caught on camera, the French president insists that they were just joking, which we all know is a lie. But let's look at how CNN covered the incident. CNN video of Brigitte Macron pushing President Macron fuels Russian disinformation. Russian disinformation, have we heard that from the leftist media before? You know, that was the narrative around Hunter Biden's laptop. We were told that Russia meddled in the 2016 election, and now there's footage of the French president being slapped by his wife. What do? They link the story to Russian disinformation. It's almost like there's a pattern here when it comes to one side of politics. Now, Macron's office put out a statement saying they were just horsing around and that was all that was needed to give ammunition to the conspiracy theorists. Now, I do have to say that there are some wild conspiracies about the First Lady around out there that are completely absurd, but it is not a conspiracy that Brigitte Macron slapped her husband. And it really has a lot of people reflecting on their romantic love story, where Brigitte was Emmanuel's teacher. She was nearly 40 years old and he was just 15 when they met, which is really gross when you think about it. But the hosts of The View have discussed the incident on the plane. And who would have seen this coming? But Whoopi Goldberg has come out leaping to the couple's defence and Brigitte's defence, insisting that she was simply reaching for her husband's face.
I'm sorry, what I saw, and maybe I'm crazy, but I saw someone doing this. Come here, let me move you.
I did not see that. I saw embarrassment
That's what I saw.
Okay,
I saw
what I
her reaching
saw
for his face.
Was a flight attendant.
And I'm sure that's exactly what Whoopi would say if this was Donald Trump and Melania. And when other hosts suggested that it was clearly icy between the couple as Brigitte refused to hold her husband's hand when he offered it to her while the cameras were rolling, well, Whoopi has a brilliantly insightful explanation for that too.
Joking narrative is sweet. I mean, we won't ever know what's going on here, but I
can tell you why she won't take his hand.
Why?
Because she doesn't want to look like she can't come down the stairs.
Or that, but there's versions.
Of course. Thank goodness for Whoopi and her spot-on analysis, where a clearly violent Brigitte Macron is defended for her behaviour. Joining us now is Brent Buchanan, GOP pollster and messaging strategist. Brent, great to see you. I want to get into the latest polling with you in a moment, but first of all, can I get your reaction to how the hosts of The View have covered the Macron slap? I mean, if it was Donald Trump and Melania, I'm sure we'd get a pretty different perspective.
I think I was the third person today to watch The View after you sent me the link to their Twitter post. But I can tell you, normal Americans do not respond to watching The View. And honestly, I was a bit shocked in the fact that they really didn't go after defending Macron's wife very hard.
Okay, look, it comes after reports that Disney CEO Bob Iger asked the co-hosts of The View to turn down their heated political rhetoric, aka their anti-Trump rhetoric. And in case you're not familiar with just how far these hosts go, here's a reminder.
Take him seriously and take him literally.
I don't think that we have to. I think it would be remiss of us to not say Joe Biden knows how to do this.
Yes,
he knows how to do this. He's quite good at this, and you know you can't refute anything with him because he just. When I say him, I mean
he rambles.
Trump.
Yeah.
He tends to just.
But can I mention one thing?
Spitting while speaking about the president, that is what you get when you watch Whoopi Goldberg. So Disney sources told the Daily Beast that both Disney and the ABC News president recently suggested that the talk show hosts be less antagonistic on political issues. Brent, is this actually going to help The View? Or really, when you look at their coverage time and time again, should they just be cancelled at this point?
Well, if you're speaking to highly educated white women with no children or no children at home who have nothing to do except watch The View, and that really is the new base of the Democratic Party, then maybe The View actually has a place. But when you look at the broad spectrum of what Americans want, is they want to be more in the center or actually not political at all. And so this call to The View is really a reaction to the 2024 election, which basically stopped the swing of the political pendulum. And so what happened with Obama's election in 2008 is that after he got elected, he said, let me take this pendulum and swing it as far to the left as possible. And what's going to happen to the pendulum? It's going to swing to the right equally. And that's how we got Donald Trump. And so when Joe Biden came in, he said, well, Obama didn't go far enough. Let me pull that pendulum even further. And then it swung further to the right with Donald Trump 2.0. And now you have these TV shows like The View and Disney and others who are looking at their base, their subscriber base, their viewership, and seeing it plummeting and realizing that they have pulled the pendulum way too far to the left.
Let's get into the polling and the data now. Trump has been back in power for nearly 130 days, and in that time, there's been a massive shift in how Americans feel about the country and the direction that it's heading in. So at the time of the election in November last year, when Joe Biden was in power, more than 75% of Americans believed the country was going in the wrong direction, which is, of course, part of the reason Donald Trump delivered such a landslide victory. Now we have Trump back. He's been back in power for some time. He's been getting the work done. And the latest polling by Rasmussen has found that 50% of Americans believe the country is on the right track. And that same polling group has found that Trump's approval rating is at 53%. Look, it's fascinating because whether you like him or not, it appears as though he's certainly giving people confidence about what's ahead, about the future. And his approval rating, well, it suggests that people do think that he's doing a great job. What do you put this down to?
Well, those numbers are a bit rosy, but there's definitely a trend to where Donald Trump's image has improved. I mean, we've seen it in our weekly polling also. And a lot of it comes from the fact that Americans definitely wanted change, but Trump brought so much change within his first 100 days that they really didn't understand how to grasp what all was going on. Every single day he was coming out with something brand new, changing what they'd known for years. And now it feels like the pace has slowed down a little bit of how many changes are happening. So I really say the first 100 days were probably the hardest, but the most important for Donald Trump. And in the last 30 days, there's been a bit more stability in how much change is coming. And that is really what is driving this reaction to Donald Trump's image improving in the last month or so.
Okay. Well, meanwhile, Democrats are not polling well at all. Recent polling from NBC and Fox News had the Democrats reaching an all-time low. I want to get your thoughts on why that could be in a moment, but I want to talk to you about this bizarre new strategy that they're putting in place. We know that the Democrats know how to waste money. We saw that in the election campaign last year, where Kamala Harris blew more than $1 billion in a few months for what was essentially a disastrous election campaign. But just when you thought that, you know, they couldn't waste any more money or what they spend money on couldn't be more ridiculous, the Democrats are spending $20 million on a study examining how to speak to American men. The New York Times reports that their $20 million project, Speaking with American Men, a strategic plan, will look at the language and content that gains the attention of male voters. So this, of course, comes after their brutal election loss, where 53% of men aged between 18 and 44 supported Donald Trump. So, Brent, what's your assessment of this $20 million on learning how to speak to men? Is that really going to help them?
Well, first off, I would like to offer for only $10 million a study in how to understand people who watch The View. And that probably will turn out about as well as this $20 million studying how to speak to men. But no joke, there was actually a study done a couple of years ago about testosterone levels in men and how that affected their political views. And so this must be low testosterone men trying to figure out how to speak to men with normal and high testosterone. But really what it comes down to is that Democrats are now the party of the coastal elites, and these folks have no clue how to talk to normal folks. And so they're trying to throw money at the problem as opposed to looking internally and saying, what have we done and said, and what positions have we taken that have made normal people, male and female, both turn away from the left, not even the center left anymore, but the left parties of the U.S. and around the world, because they just do not understand normal folks anymore. They've never run into a normal person in their everyday life.
And the Democrats, they're right now searching for a new leader. They've been trying to rebrand for some time, and they really haven't been able to gain momentum. Do you see them turning this around at some point? It looks pretty grim.
Well, it's really hard to be the party out of power when your opposing party has such a strong leader like the Republicans have in Donald Trump. I mean, I remember back to the Obama days, once he took power in 2009, that it wasn't really until the Tea Party movement came around after Obamacare was pushed out and some of the planned changes to the tax laws. But even then, we didn't have a leader. We just had a movement that was asking for a leader. And so far, the left hasn't even found its movement. And without that, they can't find their leader. We recently did a study where we looked at and asked voters who the head of the Democratic Party is and listed out about 10 to 12 options. And not even the Democrats could come up with an answer over 20% of who the own leader of their party was.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, certainly the number one question that Americans were thinking while Joe Biden was in office was who is actually running the country? And now a bombshell video has emerged of the Democratic National Committee's Vice Chair, David Hogg, admitting who actually ran the 2024 race behind the scenes.
Foundational question for me is like, how corrupt is the DNC if so many people knew, or few people knew about Biden, well, the president of the United States?
I mean, I think the fact of the matter is the DNC is always going to be like a campaign arm of the president, ultimately. The bigger issue was like the inner circle that was around Biden. That's it.
And I can't stress you enough.
Like Joe Biden's chief of staff, like had an enormous amount of power.
Joe Biden?
Joe Biden's chief of staff.
That was like an open secret at the left. Like, I would avoid him. Like, he was scary.
So that was secretly recorded and then published by Project Veritas. And there we have it. He's admitting that Jill Biden's chief of staff, Anthony Bernal, had enormous power. And this comes after Jake Tapper's book, Original Sin, revealed that former President Joe Biden's aides considered Jill Biden one of the most powerful first ladies in history, which made her top aide, Anthony Bernal, one of the most influential people in the White House. What's your assessment of this? How damning is this for Jill Biden?
The only people who finally realized that Joe Biden was not actually in charge of this country for the last 4 years is the media. And I don't know if they were complicit in hiding it, but at minimum, they were incompetent in not seeing it, because Americans realized this. That is why Joe Biden's image was so bad. That is why the direction of the country was so poor, is because Americans actually knew what was going on because they saw it with their own eyes, and then they realized the consequences of it. And for those of you who ever want to come to the United States, if you ever go to a barbecue joint that has a ceiling and a backdrop like that, you have found the right barbecue place. Wherever they had dinner with a Project Veritas and David Hogg, that's where you want to go find American barbecue.
Finally, the Trump administration is cutting federal contracts with Harvard University, intensifying the president's clash with the nation's oldest and wealthiest university. Now, Donald Trump is talking about giving the money that was going to Harvard to trade schools.
They're taking $5 billion, and I'd rather see that money go to trade schools. And by the way, they're totally anti-Semitic at Harvard, as you know, and some other colleges, too, in all fairness to them. And it's been exposed, very exposed. And I think they're dealing very badly. Every time they fight, they lose another $250 million. Yesterday, we found another $100 million. And they have, they have a fund, an endowment, $52 billion. All right? They get a lot of that from the United States. And I think it's ridiculous.
It's an interesting argument. Should this money go, towards trade schools instead of funding woke Harvard? Is this going to win Donald Trump political points?
If you look at what's happened in American politics in the last 20 years, it's really been driven by what we call the diploma divide. So if you're not college educated, 20 years ago, you were more likely to be a Democrat, and now today you're more likely to be a Republican. When we just finished an exit study of the U.S. election, we found that folks who came out for the first time to vote for Donald Trump, which means they'd skipped 2020 or they weren't registered in 2020 and did not participate, 80% of them did not have a college degree. And then when you look at the folks who flipped from Biden in 2020 to Trump in 2024, you are much more likely to be non-college educated. The base of the Republican Party is not college educated. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is cost, because going to a university now is so expensive. Two, they walk out of there with degrees that now AI can do in the next 5 minutes instead of them that they spent 5 years getting a degree for. And it's really all driven by the fact that going to college used to be the common sense thing, and now it takes your common sense out of you. And Donald Trump is attacking Harvard. One, because there's no reason for us to be giving universities that much money. But two, because that is no longer the base of the Republican Party. And Donald Trump has always been a leader in figuring out where's the Republican Party headed, and he drives them there. And much of this is from the diploma divide.
Yeah, it's interesting. Brent Buchanan, GOP pollster and messaging strategist, thank you so much for your time and joining us on Power Hour. Joining us now is former president of the Victorian Liberal Party and Sky News contributor Michael Kroger. Michael, thank you for joining us on Power Hour. In news breaking as we record this, a US court has blocked Donald Trump's Liberation Day tariffs. Now, it's the first major legal challenge against the president's sweeping import policies. The Court of International Trade says that Donald Trump overreached his authority, and it ruled that duties cannot be imposed on imports from nations that sell more to the US than they buy. Now, we know that Trump is appealing this ruling. Can I get your reaction?
Well, this is typical Donald Trump. The way to look at his presidency is he's a man in a hurry. He goes 2 steps forward, knowing that in many cases he's going to go 1 step back. That's just what he does. He pushes the envelope everywhere he can and then reaches some form of compromise. Now, it's very arguable that he overreached in relation to tariffs. The powers divested in the presidency through Congress that they gave him. His then use of this emergency declaration that he's made in relation to many things. Of course, his decisions are going to be challenged, but he accepts that. It's, as I said, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. He knows he's not going to get everything he wants. He reaches out and then he compromises back. So he'll appeal this. It'll end up in the Supreme Court in America. Who knows what will happen there? But he just sees this as an occupational hazard. That's how he treats all of these decisions he's making in relation to the universities, the Middle East, the Ukraine, etc. Everything he does, that's his modus operandi. It'll succeed on some occasions and it won't on others.
Okay.
That's Donald Trump for you, Gab.
We'll see how this plays out. And Trump's frustration with Putin appears to be escalating. Donald Trump claims that the Russian leader is now playing with fire. He wrote on Truth Social, "What Vladimir Putin doesn't realise is that if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have already happened to Russia, and I mean really bad. He's playing with fire." Now, Trump indicated over the weekend that he was considering sanctions against Russia, and we know at this point he's really been unable to persuade Putin to make significant concessions in peace negotiations with the Ukraine. Now, the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, has, of course, intensified the war recently. We've been seeing that. What's your assessment of where things are at the moment? Has it reached the point that it is too late?
No, every war ends one way or the other, for better or worse. The Europeans are going to stick with the Ukraine. The Russians are going to continue what they're doing. The only hope for an immediate peace was Trump, his famous one-day declaration, which unfortunately hasn't come to pass. I think this will wax and wane for quite a while to come yet. In the end, they will reach some kind of peace deal. Obviously not to the extent that Trump wants, because he wanted this resolved quickly. But in the end, it'll come to a peace deal. Unfortunately, as Trump says, thousands of people die in the meantime, but that doesn't look like, Gab, there's any hope for an immediate resolution, given that Trump's now appeared to have given up on Putin. He thought his friendship would make a difference, but it hasn't.
Trump has revealed he told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to hold off on any strikes against Iran to give his administration more time to push for a new nuclear deal.
I wanted very strong, where we can go in with inspectors, we can take whatever we want, we can blow up whatever we want, but nobody getting killed. We can blow up a lab, but nobody's going to be in the lab, as opposed to everybody being in the lab and blowing it up, right? Two ways of doing it. Yeah, I told him this would be inappropriate to do right now because we're very close to a solution. Now, that could change at any moment, but right now I think they want to make a deal, and if we can make a deal, save a lot of lives.
When do you think a deal could happen on Iran?
On which?
A deal with Iran could happen. When
I don't know. I think over the next couple of weeks, if it happens.
And as we just heard, Trump says he believes an agreement could come together over the next couple of weeks. Do you see that happening?
Probably not. He thought there'd be a deal in Ukraine. He thought there'd be a deal in Gaza. He thought there'd be a deal with Hamas, the hostages, etc. Look, he puts a massive amount of store on personal relations, and in the end, a lot of leaders know that he's only there for 4 years. This is a long game. The Chinese taught us years ago, plan for decades ahead. Don't worry about something immediate. So the same with North Korea. He tried to do deals with Kim Jong-un, etc. The Iranians are playing a long game. They've held control. The mullahs have held control since the revolution. 4 decades ago. So I don't see a deal coming. And ultimately, Israel may need to take out these weapons. They would be doing the world a great favour if they did, because Iran is the centre of evil in the modern world, as we know, Gab. But do I see a deal coming in the immediate short term? Unfortunately, I don't. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think so.
What's your assessment of how Donald Trump is perceived on the world stage right now? Do you think he's as feared as he once was, or should he be getting credit for really trying to be an anti-war president?
He made one major tactical blunder, an immense tactical blunder. He fell into the trap of believing that he started no wars. I mean, obviously, he looked back at his presidency and people said to him, no wars started under you. And Trump took this view, looked at himself and thought, yeah, I'm a peacenik. I should be up there for the Nobel Peace Prize. So he basically said to the world he was surrendering American military power in the name of peace. He wasn't going to be an aggressor, apart from Yemen, where no one's really watching. He doesn't want to commit American troops, and we saw that recent speech the other day by the Vice President, saying that soldiers come first. So Trump appears to have surrendered his military power. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, they've got the best weaponry in the world, the most advanced weapon in the world. If he says to the world, which he has, American military might is not going to be used to resolve the Ukraine, to resolve Gaza, to resolve Iran, then basically he's no longer feared as he was. Because what people fear, American military might. Yes, they don't like sanctions, and that has short-term effects and medium-term effects, but mainly on the population. I mean, no government appears to have been overthrown recently because the governments had sanctions put on it, namely Iran and Russia. These governments tend to survive these sanctions in one way or the other. As I said, it's the public that pays the price. But in the end, if America surrenders its military power, no, Gab, it's not feared as it used to be. And that's one of the problems with Trump. He's negotiating now with one hand tied behind his back.
Well, I'm sure he's still more feared than Joe Biden was, and I'm sure he's more feared
no
than
doubt.
Kamala Harris if she won the election. And that is who I have to ask you about, because the former Vice President has visited Australia. She spoke on stage at the 2025 Australasian Real Estate Conference on the Gold Coast over the weekend, and she is being slammed for delivering word salad after word salad. Here she is.
You have the ability to understand the context in which you live, the context in which others live. You're more likely to then connect with them and understand what's important to them. The vast majority of human beings are very intelligent, regardless of their education level, regardless of where they're from, and intelligent enough to know whether when you are looking at them, you are looking at them with a level of respect. They will know that you are someone who is actually interested in their life and their reality and their fears and their dreams, or not.
We spoke about this when it was announced that Kamala Harris would be paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to speak for an hour at this real estate conference. But now she's done it. She's spoken to the audience there. Listening to some of those clips, what's your reaction? Was it as bad as you thought it would be?
I think it's worse. I mean, what vacuous babble that is, but that's what she's known for. I mean, let's be frank, she was a circus act at this conference. She wasn't there to enlighten the Australian property industry about payroll taxes, building costs, over-regulation, planning approvals, building approvals, the shortage of contractors, the price of materials, stamp duty, et cetera, et cetera. These are the things that are of real interest to real estate agents who were at that conference, thousands of them, and people in the building industry. She comes along and gives this, as you say, word salad, this vacuous babble. I mean, she was just a circus act. Let's be frank. No one learned anything from her speech. She was there for pure entertainment purposes, but good on her. I gather she got $500,000 for that speech. If she can get $500,000 for saying that, I would have done it for $400 myself.
Okay.
And I know something about the property industry. So no, what a waste of space. What a waste of space.
Kroger, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
Thanks, Gab.
Joining us now is former US Congressman Jim Reni. Jim Reni, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour. We've been hearing about it for some time. It's passed the House of Representatives. It's now under consideration in the Senate. This is Trump's one big, beautiful bill.
The one big, beautiful bill, and it is a big, beautiful bill. And so I think the Senate is going to get there. I hope they're going to get there.
The bill spans over 1,000 pages and includes tax cuts, such as making permanent the 2017 tax cuts, and also introduces additional tax reductions. It proposes $800 billion in Medicaid cuts and eligibility changes. It allocates $150 billion for defence spending, $70 billion for border security, and scales back clean energy tax credits. Now, the White House says that this bill saves more than $1.6 trillion in spending, but there's also concern that this bill will add $3.8 trillion to the federal debt over 10 years. What's your assessment on this big, beautiful bill?
Well, again, thank you for having me. And it is a big, beautiful bill, except the problem is it does add a tremendous amount to the debt over the next 10 years. And that's the real key. Look, I'm very supportive of the tax cuts from 2017 being extended, but I also do think it's time that we really take a good look at how we can reduce our debts and deficits and the trajectory of our debts and deficits over the next 10 years, not add to them. So I think there will be a number of members of the Senate, and there still are some people in the House that are a little concerned about how much it adds to the debts and deficits of the United States government.
The White House is arguing, though, that this bill saves more than $1.6 trillion in spending. Could this be seen as a starting point?
Well, look, there are some cuts in this bill, but there's not enough. I was in Congress from 2011 to 2019. We also made some significant cuts. The problem is much of the expenditures of the United States government are spending that's on autopilot, and none of those expenses are being looked at closely, which are things that really need to be addressed. Because if you're cutting 1.8 trillion or even 2 trillion, but your automatic expenditures, your mandatory expenditures are growing by 5 or 6 trillion, you're not making any headway. And that's the biggest problem we have right now with federal spending.
Elon Musk says that he's disappointed by Trump's massive spending bill, warning that it undercuts the work of Doge, the agency he once led. Let's take a look.
Disappointed to see the massive spending bill, frankly, which increases the budget deficit, not just decrease it, and undermines the work that the Doge team is doing.
I actually thought that when this big, beautiful bill came along. I mean, like, everything he's done on Doge gets wiped out in the first year.
I think a bill can be big or it can be beautiful, but I don't know if it can be both. My personal opinion.
Look, Elon Musk noted that there are parts of the bill that he is thrilled about, but what do you make of Elon's assessment? Is it embarrassing for Trump?
Well, the one thing is true. I'm surprised that Elon has said that, although I agree with what he's saying. Those cuts, about $100 billion in spending cuts, are not part of this big, beautiful bill. I do know there's a rescission package coming out in the next 7 to 10 days to take care of some of that spending. But we're talking about very minor spending cuts in Doge that could have been put in this bill as well and passed. The problem with making it a separate bill, whether it's 7, 10 days, or even 2 weeks from now, is you have to get approval again from the House and Senate. And that's always the tricky thing when you have a very slim majority in the House especially, but not that big of a majority in the Senate as well.
Well, Elon has thanked Donald Trump in a post today as he steps back from Doge. He wrote, "As my scheduled time as a special government employee comes to an end, I would like to thank President Trump for the opportunity to reduce wasteful spending. The Doge mission will only strengthen over time as it becomes a way of life throughout the government." Now, I believe that Elon Musk deserves so much credit for what him and the Doge team have been able to do, what they've been able to find so far. $175 billion has been saved according to what's on the Doge website. It's around $1,000 a year for the taxpayer. What's your assessment of Elon Musk and what he's been able to achieve in these few months?
Well, I'm happy to see that. Look, President Clinton did this, President Nixon did this. All the presidents have said we need to make these cuts. President Trump has at least set up a commission and committee and moved the numbers to a point where he's saying we need to make these cuts. So I'm happy with what he's done. I think there is wasteful spending. The problem is it has to be cut. Even when I was in Congress, we talked about all this wasteful spending. But Congress has to be able to pass bills that cut this spending or pass a rescission bill, or this will just be a waste of time.
Yes, so let's talk about how Donald Trump does want to make some of these Doge cuts official. The White House is set to send its first Doge package to Congress next week, aiming to slash federal spending. Office of Management and Budget Director Russell Vought confirmed the move to Fox Business.
So, rumor has it that we got a big rescission package, an Elon Musk Doge rescission package coming up. Can you confirm it?
I can. We'll be sending that up on Monday or Tuesday whenever the House is back in session. They will get our first rescissions bill. And again, this has been proposed and we've talked about it. We want to make sure that Congress passes its first rescissions bill, including the Doge, and we will send more if they pass it. And so this is the first one is foreign aid, USAID cuts, many of the waste and garbage that was funding not only wasteful but hurting our foreign policy, but also the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and NPR. We'll be sending that up and we're working with Congress. And we've had good conversations to make sure that they knew what was coming. They had some input as to changes that could be made to make it something that could pass the House. And we're excited for that to occur next week.
So this is almost a $10 billion package, but it's also below where many Conservatives would like it to be. What's your sense? What's your assessment? And also, what does the future of Doge look like? As we heard from Elon Musk that he believes it's going to continue being strong and will be a sort of way of life. What does that actually look like?
Well, look, I don't know what happens to Doge, but the one thing that has to happen is the Doge package that's being sent up there next week has to be passed. And you heard that is in his conversations that, he is saying that this is the first set of Doge cuts. We want to see if Congress can pass these before we send others up there. So that's the White House, that's the administration saying, let's see if they can cut this small amount, because if they can't do this, they're never going to cut a big, beautiful Doge rescission package either. And I think that's a real key to see whether this can get done. Now, as I said, it's not been done in the past. One rescission package was passed maybe 30 years ago, but we haven't been able to do that in a long time. It'll be interesting to see whether they can get it done. It should be done. I hope it gets done. But again, you got to get the House and Senate both to approve it.
I want to talk about COVID. It's been a fair bit of time since we spent way too much time talking about COVID. But today, FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino has announced that there is an active investigation into the origins of COVID. He wrote on X, "As we read and process reports of a new COVID strain emerging, I want you to know that we are actively investigating in multiple field offices the cover-up of the origin of the COVID virus, along with associated matters requiring our attention. You deserve the answers." Now, it's interesting because at the moment, the White House has on its official website that it was a lab leak, but there are still so many questions left unanswered around the origins of COVID and, of course, the cover-up. What do you make of this, the investigation? What could we possibly find?
Well, look, I know we've been looking for the origins of COVID all the way back in 2019 and 2020 when it first came to the United States. So it's good that we're looking. I would not want to waste too much time on it, but I do know it becomes good political fodder when you continue to look at these things. But I'm not sure we'll ever find out. And at the same time, there should not be any cover-up. So that's always good. But in the end, we got to move forward, not backward. I've said that time and time again. This is more political, but at the same time, it's always good to learn from past history so we don't repeat the same mistakes.
RFK Jr. has made an announcement that's probably triggering for everyone against his Maha movement. He's announced that he's no longer recommending for healthy children and healthy pregnant women to get the COVID vaccine. Let's take a listen.
I couldn't be more pleased to announce that as of today, the COVID vaccine for healthy children and healthy pregnant women has been removed from the CDC recommended immunization schedule. Last year, the Biden administration urged healthy children to get yet another COVID shot despite the lack of any clinical data to support the repeat booster strategy in children.
That ends today. It's common sense and it's good science.
There's no evidence healthy kids need it today, and most countries have stopped recommending it for children.
We're now one step closer to realizing President Trump's promise to make America healthy again.
Look, in my opinion, it seems like it's common sense at this point. We know the impact of COVID has significantly dropped, partly due to widespread immunity from either prior infections or vaccinations. And we know that vaccines are primarily designed to reduce severe outcomes and the risk of severe illness in healthy children. Well, that risk is low. Around 4% of hospitalizations from COVID involve children, mostly with underlying conditions. But of course, the mainstream media always freak out when RFK Jr. is in the headlines in the same way they freak out about Donald Trump and Elon Musk. This is how CBS covered the announcement. They had an article that they published with the headline, "Health Experts Fear Potential Public Health Impacts from RFK Jr. Halting COVID Vaccine Recommendations for Kids, Pregnant Women." Now, health experts and fear, these it seems like a headline straight out of 2020, but on RFK Jr.'s announcement, it also comes amid concerns about potential rare side effects from the vaccine, such as myocarditis, if I am pronouncing that correctly, a heart inflammation linked to the mRNA vaccines, particularly in younger individuals. As we covered last week, Biden officials knew about potential COVID-19 vaccine risks and took steps to downplay them, which in my opinion is unforgivable. But what's your assessment of this announcement and the Maha movement more broadly? Is it really achieving what it set out to?
Well, look, I think you said it best. This is just common sense. And, why would we be trying to push a vaccine, especially on healthy children and healthy pregnant women, when at the same time we know the risks are limited? I'm also a big believer in it's their choice anyway. I mean, if a healthy parent wants their healthy children to have the COVID vaccine, so be it. Those are the rights, the individual rights. But I don't think the government should be mandating any of these things, nor should they be recommending it and pushing it like the Biden administration did.
Former US Congressman Jim Reni, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour. Great to speak with you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Meghan Markle's podcast has ended its 8-episode run, and there are no plans to release a second season at this point. What a surprise. Riley Sullivan is a lifestyle reporter here at skynews.com.au, and he's always across the latest celebrity headlines. Riley, great to see you.
Lovely to be back.
So Meghan Markle's podcast, the series Confessions of a Female Founder, has officially wrapped up after 8 weeks and hitting the airways. Is this the last we'll ever hear about the podcast, do you think?
I do. I think so. I think that, as we've spoken about, this show has completely underperformed. It did not really appear on the Spotify charts. This was, of course, the podcast that she made with Lemonada Media. It's still unclear, actually, about what money has come from this podcast. So originally, when she signed up with Spotify, there was money up front. That deal went south. She signed up with Lemonada. But looking into the details of it, it's unclear if she actually took any money up front for this deal at all, or if it was supposed to be a performance-based deal. I think on that alone, there's no way this will come back because it hasn't performed well, you know, in terms of advertising or any types of revenue you can glean from the podcast. It really has failed on that front. Also, there was a very interesting article that came out in a business publication called Fast Company. Never really heard of it, right? Well, weirdly, they got an exclusive interview with Meghan Markle, and the interview reads like a press release. It's basically sort of giving her claim, really celebrating all her achievements. And these are things that have been a complete failure. You know, American Riviera Orchard, all of these other sort of projects that have come and gone. And in that, she's already sort of subtly moving on. She said, you know, this was great, but you know, maybe there's talk of a second season. She's sort of retroactively making it seem like it was always going to be a one-off, and that wasn't true.
No.
It was supposed to be an ongoing podcast. It's gone after 8 episodes, but, you know, 7 hours of audio content. I hope Lemonada didn't pay her too much.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Prince Harry has flown all the way from his Montecito home to Shanghai to appear at a sustainable travel summit. Now, this is a sustainable travel summit, so fans are questioning why he didn't just dial in remotely.
Yeah.
What do you make of this move?
Exactly that. I mean, why was he there? You know, this is one, from a PR point of view, it looks ridiculous to be fronting a sustainable travel summit and jetting in from Montecito all the way to China. It's like a 6,000-mile journey across the Pacific. I mean, you know, very wasteful. And as far as we know, he appeared on stage for a few minutes and took a few photos. So it's not like he was on a tour or he was doing lots of engagements to make it worthwhile. For example, you know, when the royal family's traveling, I'm thinking of someone like Princess Anne. When she goes to Sri Lanka for 5 days, she is doing 10, 20 engagements in that time. She's not just flying over there for 5 minutes and flying back. You know, this was sort of ridiculous on that front. I also think that there's some other factors here. I think there's probably a mercenary aspect. Maybe there's a paid appearance fee. A lot of royals, Harry's isn't the only one, you know, a lot of royal family members that are non-working royals make a lot of money going abroad, making appearances, showing up at events. That's why we see Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie in the Middle East all the time.
Right.
It's not because they love the dates. It's because, you know, they're there for engagements and business engagements. And the other sort of aspect of it, which I think really speaks to Harry's personality, is he loves the adoration he gets in China. When he's traveling abroad, he gets the red carpet treatment. He's treated like a member of the royal family. He gets that first-class treatment and the deference that I think that he craves. So I think that's really what's going on here. But the whole thing was pretty ridiculous.
Absolutely. Now, King Charles has converted his home on his Sandringham estate into a luxury holiday rental, which is available to the public. Now, this sounds great, of course, but the big question is how much it would actually cost.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's actually quite a bargain. It's something like £6,000 to rent out. It's a beautiful property, sort of an arts and crafts style home on the Sandringham estate. This isn't surprising. You know, when we talk about Sandringham, of course, there's the main house where the royal family stays, but there's also all of these other smaller properties and cottages and workers, you know, where all the workers, because, you know, there's a huge staff living there. So I don't think they're exactly going to be renting out the throne room, but for $6,000, I think it sounds like a pretty good deal.
Yeah, better than I expected.
Yeah.
Now, the Norwegian Royal Palace has announced that Princess Ingrid Alexandra will move to Australia to study at the University of Sydney. Now, tell us about this. When will she actually be arriving?
Yes, so Princess Ingrid Alexandra, as you said, is moving to Sydney. She'll be at Sydney University starting in the second semester in August. I noticed there were some publications that have shared very specific details about where she's staying. Just editorially, Sky, we've opted not to. I think it's really important with something like this to protect her privacy, but she will be in the Harbour City from August onwards. I think the decision to have her study here, I think there's a few factors at play. Firstly, she has just completed military service. She's 21. I think it's a great time in her life to be abroad and enriching herself before she's, in full-time royal mode. I also think that there's frankly a lot of scandal at the moment in the Norwegian monarchy. They've had her half-sibling. It's quite convoluted, but basically Ingrid Alexandra has a half-sibling. Her mother had a previous relationship before she married into the monarchy, and there's a son from that relationship. He's about 28 years old. It's her half-brother, Ingrid's half-brother, and he is currently facing very serious charges of sexual assault. So he possibly could, be spending a lot of time in jail. This is a very, very serious case. And even though he's not a member of the royal family, this has been a huge scandal in Norway. Also, in terms of the Norwegian royal family, Ingrid's aunt, Martha Louise, I believe we talked about her on this show last year. She's very controversial. She's a clairvoyant. She is a real kind of free spirit. Nothing wrong with that. But again, there's maybe a bit of a publicity issue with that. So I think this is a really great move for her to be away from the chaos and away from the press in Norway, in Australia. And I hope she has a great time. I think it's a wonderful tradition of royals studying in Australia. We had the current King of Thailand spent several years studying in Australia. Of course, King Charles spent a semester at Geelong Grammar. So, it's just a wonderful tradition. And I think Aussies, we're always good. We give people their privacy. We let them have their space.
Absolutely. And it is exciting for us.
Yeah.
Now, Denmark's King Frederik has presented a special royal honour to his nephews after they were stripped of their royal titles. So what's prompted Frederik to do this?
Yes, this is a really clever decision. So essentially, there was a huge scandal in the Danish royal family a couple of years ago where Margrethe, Frederik's mother, stripped some of her grandchildren of their royal titles. It was a very controversial move, but it was sort of kind of like what King Charles envisions, a slimmed down monarchy. She did it because the Danish royal family works because it's small, and she kind of felt that it was getting a bit too extended with all of these sort of cousins and nephews. So that decision went down like a lead balloon. Frederik's brother's children were impacted by that decision. He was furious. He spoke against his mother in the Danish press. He said it was a form of, mistreatment of them. It was very, very controversial. And now 2 years later, I think Frederik's really righting the wrong. I think it's a really genius move. He's brought them into this order, which is the sort of civilian honour, very sort of royal style with civilian honour, but it's not restoring the title. So he's not contradicting Margrethe.
Okay.
He's not going back on her word and her actions, but he is extending the olive branch. I think it was a very classy move by Frederik.
Sounds like it indeed. Riley Sullivan, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour.
Thank you.
And that is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. We'll see you next week. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.